What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. The ongoing conflict in Ukraine has brought to light the complexities and contradictions inherent in Russia's military strategy and political decision-making. The situation in the Kursk region, where Ukrainian forces have taken control of significant portions of Russian territory, has highlighted these issues even further. This unexpected development not only underscores the vulnerabilities of Russia's military apparatus, but also raises profound questions about the motivations and priorities of the country's leadership. And surprisingly, it also created so-called Putin's Paradox, which made regular Russian civilians living in bordering Kursk region to be actually grateful for their incursions by Ukrainians. In this video, we will analyze the unfolding events in the Kursk region, the contrasting narratives emerging from various media sources, which created this Putin's paradox, and the potential trajectories for the future of this conflict. The incursion into the Kursk region by Ukrainian forces represents a significant turning point in the ongoing conflict, one that has caught many by surprise. General Valery Gerasimov, for example, his report to President Vladimir Putin and other high-ranking officials provided a narrative of containment and control, suggesting that the Ukrainian advance had been successfully repelled through a combination of airstrikes, artillery bombardments, and reinforcements of the border units. The Russian propaganda still calls this an attempt by Ukrainians to cross the border. However, the reality tells a different story, one of a significant territorial losses, the capture of Russian soldiers and a civilian population who is left vulnerable, isolated, and turned into refugees. The fact that Ukrainian forces have managed to occupy over 1,000 square kilometers of Russian territory is not just merely a military setback, it is a blow to the perceived invulnerability of Russian borders. This occupation has also led to a humanitarian crisis with thousands of civilians stranded in the conflict zone, cut off from essential supplies and services. The official response from the Russian government, which downplays the severity of the situation, stands in sharp contrast to the experiences of those on the ground, further eroding public trust in the leadership. Beyond the immediate military implications, this event raises serious questions about Russia's broader strategic objectives. Why has the Russian military, one of the most formidable in the world, been unable to prevent such a significant breach of its territory? Is this a sign of deeper issues within the Russian armed forces, such as poor morale, inadequate training, or logistical failures? These are the questions that demand answers, not only from a military perspective, but also in terms of national security and political stability. The role of media in shaping the narrative of Kursk region's occupation cannot be overstated. As Ukrainian forces took control of the area, international media outlets, including Ukrainian and Western journalists, began broadcasting footage that painted a picture vastly different from the Russian government's official account. Videos showing Ukrainian soldiers distributing humanitarian aid, maintaining public order, and interacting peacefully with local residents have flooded platforms like YouTube, challenging the Kremlin's narrative and casting doubt on the effectiveness of its informational control. These images are not just a challenge to the Russian government's authority, they are a direct assault on the carefully curated image of Russian military might and benevolence. The footage shows Ukrainian forces as organized and compassionate, in contrast to the destruction and chaos often associated with Russian military operations in other conflict zones. You guys obviously remember all these videos from liberated cities like Bakhmut, Avdiivka or Marinka, where there is not a single stone left standing, where 90% of its population left as a result of never-ending combat activities, and now they can't even return home, because there's simply no more home. Even Russian propaganda itself could not find a single Ukrainian on these territories to do a fake interview about how happy this person was to be liberated by the Russian army. Yet, We see videos from Kursk region from regular Russians who met Ukrainian soldiers with smiles on their faces and tears of disbelief, because until the very last moment Russian propaganda was hiding the progress of advancing Ukrainians, making it impossible for residents of Kursk region to plan their response accordingly. And when the Ukrainian incursion became impossible to hide, the local authorities simply abandoned the residents, while Putin had absolutely no reaction to these unfolding events. Later on, propaganda did try to scare the population once again, talking about the upcoming horrors of approaching Ukrainian nationalists. But once the residents met actual Ukrainian soldiers, their reaction had the biggest impact on the trustworthiness of the Russian propaganda. How is it possible for Russians to meet Ukrainians with joy, smile, and hugs? No wonder the events in Kursk are not being discussed in traditional media almost at all. That's how Putin's paradox was born. This discrepancy has a massive implications for the Russian government's ability to maintain domestic support for the war, as well as for its international reputation. However, the impact of this media coverage goes beyond the immediate conflict. It highlights the power of modern informational warfare, where controlling the narrative can be as crucial as controlling the battlefield. The Russian government's attempts to silence these reports through legal actions against journalists only serve to further highlight its desperation and inability to control the flow of information. And not just legal actions, unfortunately. A couple of days ago, a hotel in Kramatorsk, housing some Western journalists, has been precisely targeted and destroyed by Russians. It is believed that those journalists were headed to Kursk to take interviews from the local residents, something that the Putin's administration could not afford for the world to see. This situation underscores a broader trend in modern conflicts, where the battles for public perception can have significant consequences for the outcome of the war and the political stability of the nations involved. In the face of the Ukrainian occupation and the media fallout, Russia's response has been characterized by a reliance on familiar tactics. Missile strikes, aerial bombardments, targeting Ukrainian cities and infrastructure. These actions, while devastating, have done little to alter the strategic situation or to reclaim the lost territory in the Kursk region. Instead, they have highlighted the limitations of Russia's military power and the increasingly reactive nature of its strategy. Speaking once again about the most recent strike on a hotel in Kramatorsk, which resulted in the death of a Reuters journalist and injuries to several others, is emblematic of this approach. Such strikes are intended to send a message to the international media, warning them against covering the conflict in ways that are unfavorable to Russia. However, these tactics have backfired, drawing even more attention to the very issues the Russian government seeks to downplay and further isolating Russia on the global stage. Moreover, the effectiveness of these strikes is increasingly being called into question. While they cause significant damage and loss of life, they have not achieved any meaningful military objectives. The Ukrainian forces remain entrenched in the occupied territories, and the broader conflict continues to grind on with no clear end in sight. Imagine, you're in a fist fight and you get slapped in the face, and in return, you punch a wall and disturb your neighbors. This pretty much summarizes the response by the Putin's administration. This raises fundamental questions about the sustainability of Russia's current strategy and the long-term consequences of its reliance on brute force over diplomatic or strategic solutions. Such response attacks have also provoked a strong response from Ukraine, which has targeted the Russian infrastructure, including oil depots and refineries. These attacks have had a tangible impact on Russia's economy and its ability to sustain the war effort. Cities far from the front lines like Saratov or Rostov have experienced the terror of drone strikes, bringing the reality of the conflict home to ordinary Russians in a way that the government's propaganda cannot easily dismiss. The situation in Kursk and the broader conflict in Ukraine present Russia with a series of strategic dilemmas. The ongoing war, which has already cost countless lives and caused widespread devastation, shows no signs of end. Yet, the Russian leadership continues to pursue a course that seems increasingly unattainable. The occupation of Russian territory by Ukrainian forces and the subsequent media exposure have undermined the Kremlin's narrative and exposed the fragility of its military and political strategy. One potential path forward for Russia could be to seek a ceasefire or a truce, which would halt the immediate fight and provide an opportunity for diplomatic negotiations. Such an outcome could also provide the Russian leadership with a face-saving way to extricate itself from the increasingly costly and unpopular war. But on the other hand, the end of hostilities will allow Putin to resupply the army in peace and prepare for new offensive in the future. So that's a very big double-edged sword. However, pursuing a truce would require a significant shift in Russia's approach. It would necessitate a recognition that the current strategy is not only failing, but it is also causing more harm than good, both for Russia and for the regions under its control. This would be a difficult admission for a leadership that has invested so heavily in the narrative of military strength and national pride. Yet, it may be the only way to avoid further escalation and the potential for even greater losses in the future. The broader implications of this conflict for Russia's domestic and international standing are profound. Domestically, the war has exposed deep divisions within the Russian society and has strained the country's resources and morale. Internationally, Russia's actions have led to increasing isolation and condemnation, undermining its position on the world stage. The decisions made in the coming months will not only shape the future of the conflict in Ukraine, but it will also determine Russia's trajectory as a global power. The occupation of Russian territory by Ukrainian forces, the contrasting narratives emerging from the media, the limitations of military power, and the strategic dilemmas facing the Russian leadership all point to a nation at a critical crossroads. The conflict has already exacted a heavy toll on both sides, and the longer it continues, the greater the costs will be. For Russia, the path forward is fraught with challenges, but it also presents an opportunity to reconsider its approach and seek a resolution that could bring an end to the suffering and instability that have defined the past several years. Whether the leadership will seize this opportunity or continue down the path of confrontation remains to be seen, but the stakes could not be higher for Russia and the rest of the world. Guys, if you enjoyed today's episode, please like this video, subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. If you wish to support my work, there are links down below, PayPal donations, Patreon subscriptions for additional bonus content, and you can also buy the Russian Dude merch. All the links are down below. Thank you so much for watching, see you tomorrow.
We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell. Their twisted words and feeble claims on us all they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We do not believe in ridiculous Russian propaganda.